Hey guys, this is Samir from MMOs.com, another quick news recap of all major MMO news and announcements at the beginning February 10th, 2020. This is episode number 223 of the recap, and the first of news this week comes from Bandai Namco regarding Blue Protocol, the upcoming anime action MMORPG. So they released a new trailer for the game which shows off some more gameplay as well as some PvP, and as before, the game looks visually stunning. Unfortunately though, as you mentioned in mid-2019, Bandai Namco specifically came out and said that Blue Protocol won't be seeing a Western port anytime soon, but that shouldn't be too surprising as the game isn't even out in its home market of Japan yet, with the closed beta for the game set to begin on February 12th. So at least the closed beta over there is beginning soon. Interestingly, there are actually very few Japanese developed PC and MMORPGs out there. Most of the games out there are Korean or Chinese developed, so just being Japanese makes it a tad different and unique on its own. While Blue Protocol looks pretty, don't expect any kind of Western release date anytime soon. And yes, I do know they registered the trademarks in the US, which some have said is a sign they'll be launching the game in English eventually, but if they do, it'll be at least a year or so away. But again, that's just my guess. Next up, Fantasy XIV's next big patch, patch 5.2, Echoes of Fallen Stars, launching on February 18th, and with it comes a whole host of new goodies. It's a major update to the game, and it'll add new main story quests, a new raid tier, a new dungeon, new trial, new beast tribe quest, ocean fishing, and much more. Personally, I'm most excited for the new raid tier and the new story quest. And while I haven't actually played too much Final Fantasy XIV lately, I am coming back for sure for that new raid tier. Definitely excited for that. Again, it'll be launching on February 18th. And speaking of new boss fights, Old School RuneScape unveiled a new group boss fight in the Nightmare of Ishima fight. Now, like I said, this is the first group boss fight in the game which will have a unique focus on teamwork and cooperative play. Groups of up to 80 players can participate in the fight, with the difficulty scaling depending on the size of the group. Players also won't need to fight over loot as well, because anyone that deals a certain amount of damage, a certain minimum threshold, will be eligible for their own rewards. Also worth mentioning is that dying in this special instance won't make you lose all your gear like you would normally lose if you die in Old School RuneScape. And as always, Old School RuneScape remains extremely popular, regularly clocking in at over 100,000 concurrent players. It's one of the most popular MMORPGs in the Western world. Even though we don't really talk about it too much, it's right up there with World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV. And speaking of oldie MMORPGs, MMO Online is launching its Season 14 Part 2 update on February 18th, adding a whole host of new features to the nearly 2-decade-old MMORPG. Yes, MMO Online is that old, as it launched back in 2003. This new update introduces a new field to the game called Atlantis of the Abyss, which is aimed at level 1,000 and higher players. And besides the new area in the game, they also increased the game's level cap to 1150, and anytime a game updates its max level cap, it's usually a pretty big update. It's a pretty big update for MMO Online, and despite the game being super old, it's actually still really popular, both on the official server and across the many private servers out there. Up next, remember 6 Entertainment's backlash unveiling the new tower defense-like game when the entire community just wanted them to finish Camelot Unchained? Well, Mark Jacobs, the head honcho behind the game, unveiled a new release schedule for the next 90 days for new content coming out for Camelot Unchained and what they're actually working on right now. In fact, they actually went back and said last week's announcement with the new game was actually rather stupid, but they're still going to be working on the old game. It's just they said that they should have shown off the new content for Camelot Unchained before they announced and revealed this new game they're working on. I'm not sure what Mark Jacobs expected though to reveal the new game. People who funded Camelot Unchained wanted to play an MMORPG, not a team tower defense game, so the backlash shouldn't have been surprising. And since that disaster, they've unveiled some stuff they're working on for Camelot Unchained, including the PvP engine and how it's working with thousands of players on the screen at once. So just all demo stuff they're showing off, but still, I'm not too optimistic about Camelot Unchained after last week's unveiling. Next up, Phantasy Star Online 2's North American closed beta has ended this last weekend as expected, which is exactly news as we talked about it last week. But we did learn that PSO2 is launching on Steam later this year as well. And remember how I mentioned earlier that there weren't many Japanese developed MMORPGs? Well, Phantasy Star Online 2 is one of the few. In fact, I can probably only name 4 off the top of my head that were Japanese developed, but for Korean MMORPGs, I could easily name over 100. Anyway, no word on when the next round of beta testing begins, but I suspect it'll be soon because the game is launching in the spring, and they'll probably have at least one more round of beta testing between now and then. And for those of you guys that don't know too much about Phantasy Star Online 2, it's an instance dungeon persistent hub style MMORPG similar to games like Soulworker, Vindictus, and Dragon Nest. Next, a small update for Black Desert Online. The game's Guardian class got their Awakening to celebrate the occasion. The second phase of the Guardian Level Up event is also taking place from now until February 26th to help players level up. That's it for the PC version, but the console version of Black Desert is for the PS4. Just released the Kunoki class and her Awakening as well. Still weird to see how far behind the PS4 version of the game is, but they're updating pretty quickly, so it might converge with the PC version in the future. Next up, the open world sandbox ARPG Fractured, which is yet another crowdfunding game, opened its doors to stress testing to its backers. There's a few reasons I'm not too optimistic about Fractured, but the two main reasons are 1, it's yet another crowdfunded game, and 2, it's using Spatial OS, and we've seen so many games that try using Spatial OS, but end up failing or just ditching it altogether. It would be interesting to see if the game did succeed though, and I am rooting for it, but I'm not too optimistic for any crowdfunded and Spatial OS game. But hey, at least they're making enough progress to host a stress test. Next is Sandbox Fantasy MMORPG Legends of Aria, which, remember, is now free to play. Hosted a town hall stream over the weekend. Talk about the upcoming changes in Point Release 9. Release 9 will add a new Grand Bazaar, militia updates, militia ranking system, and a capture the flag mechanic. And they're also adding a new global material called Spiritwood, which can be used to repair keep doors and summon battering rams and knock down opponents' bases. Legends of Aria has been averaging only about 120 players online at any given time on Steam alone, so the player base numbers aren't great. But if you're looking for a game inspired by Ultima Online or RuneScape, this one is worth trying, because there aren't really that many other games inspired by Ultima or RuneScape. Next up, a bit of industry news. Hi-Rez Studios, the company best known for Smite and Paladins, announced a new spin-off independent game development studio called Prophecy Games, which will include Aaron Gorin, Hi-Rez's own founder, at the helm. Prophecy Games will be focusing on developing free-to-play, top-down strategy games, which has been raising an eyebrow. As a new studio to develop new games sounds interesting, but it's kind of weird to hear a top-down strategy game. Are they referring to those awful pay-to-win mobile strategy games like Game of War or Final Fantasy New Empire? I hope not, but it sounds like they are. But then again, you really can't blame them because those Clash of Clans, Game of War, those pay-to-win strategy games end up making so much money. Next, a quick reminder that Elder Scrolls Online's Harrowstorm update is launching on February 24th on the PC and Mac, and March 10th on the PS4 and Xbox One. The DLC's launch marks the start of the year-long Dark Heart of Skyrim saga, with the Harrowstorm update featuring 2 new dungeons and a bunch of other goodies. And it's available for free to active ESO Plus subscribers, and will be able to purchase in the Crown Store to everyone else. Just heads up, the upcoming updates, Greymore launches in June, with the next update scheduled to launch in August, and then the last one for the year in November. Next and last bit of news this week comes from Book of Travels. The Swedish studio behind the game unveiled their 2020 roadmap, which most importantly featured a scheduled early access launch in October. I'm not sure what to expect with this one, but the art style does look really unique. The game builds itself as a tiny multiplayer online role-playing game, so not quite massive like a traditional MMORPG. Don't get too excited about this one though, as it's yet another Kickstarter-funded game. I do feel like the disclosure is always required when talking about Kickstarter games, especially since so many of these games end up never releasing. But hey, visually this game looks interesting, and hopefully they reach their early access target in October. Anyway guys, that is for MMO News this week. I'll see you guys next time. Later guys.